at this very moment, although they may have taken a break, or they might in a moment, but at this very moment, there are oral arguments being heard in the Supreme Court about Biden's student debt relief program. You remember they announced this last August. There's something like 45 million people who are eligible for it. I believe at this point, 16 million have been approved. Something like 25 to 32 million have applied, but the approval process was halted when it received an injunction from a federal court. So they're about halfway through that process. And there are two issues in front of the Supreme Court today. One is whether the multiple states and then two individual plaintiffs have standing. The states are trying to argue, and the issue is, are they suffering any harm by this? Are they or are they just sort of bystanders? The states have had a tough time arguing that they have suffered any harm, although there is one state, I believe it's Tennessee, that has a quasi-public loan servicing facility that has facilitated some of these loans, and they stand to lose some fees if these loans are forgiven. It's a bit of a stretch, but that's what they're going with. And then there are two plaintiffs who argue, one, that because they didn't take a Pell Grant, they're losing out on the extra $10,000. It's $10,000 per person, $20,000 if it's a Pell Grant. And
that's Missouri, not Tennessee, FYI.
And Missouri, apologies. And the other defendant, if memory serves, got a private loan and therefore is also not subject to any type of loan relief because the government is only relieving public loans because that's the only ability they have. The argument against them having standing is that if they prevail, they're not in any better shape than they are now. That just means that nobody gets any debt relief. In fact, the one of those plaintiffs will lose their $10,000 worth of debt relief. Now, again, understand these plaintiffs are all being brought up by Republicans, so it's not really that they're actually upset about this. They're,
funded by the National Restaurant Association. The Mercers are funding this. The Home Depot billionaire.
Yeah, on and on and on like this. Because of course you don't want, if you're the restaurant trade association, you don't want your potential workers to have less debt because then less leverage you have with them. But here is Iowa Attorney General Brenna Bird on Fox's Fox Business with Maria Bartiromo, who we're going to be talking about a little bit later in this Dominion suit, talking about why the Biden administration may have proposed this student debt relief plan.
That's right. And I think the reason why we know that Biden announced this in August, just before the election, it was a play for votes. It was an attempt to buy votes. And, when I talk to Iowans, folks in my state, I hear a lot of people upset. I mean, many people like myself, I worked hard to pay off my college and law school debt. Worked hard. Nobody forgave it for me. Also, many other people work hard entering the workforce, and, nothing is there to help them with the student debt cancellation. They're on the hook for it, in fact.
Well, it's incredible because it's more election interference. You make a great point. He came out with this right before the election. So, again, there he won again, right? He's in the White House, AJ.
Wow. She's Maria Bartiromo. I really honestly think that there needs to be some type of intervention. But it's an interesting concept that it's election interference when you offer voters material benefits for them to vote for you.
And, she might talk to young people in Iowa, but as somebody from a state like Iowa where we all leave, they all left.
Yeah.
Like anybody with student loans left that state to make money somewhere else.
Yeah, so they can pay them back in some way. But isn't it when she talks to Iowa voters and says, I'm going to go sue the federal government on your behalf because you're mad about this, isn't she sort of trying to buy votes too?
No, that's not the same thing.
Well, she's just doing that because her voters wanted her to.
Well, it's the difference is that when Republicans are trying to buy their way to power, they do so through not like necessarily buying votes because they're a minoritarian party. They do so from doing the bid of their donors.
I mean, when they cut taxes for wealthy people, they're buying votes. In fact, everything a politician does, short of actually paying people to vote for them, could be described as buying votes and be wrong. Like, this is literally like, it's almost like that Maria Bartiromo is doing her television show for people who are like 8 years old. Who have a very, very unnuanced concept of what politics is about.
Yeah, I mean, and also the whole notion that because I had to go through this hardship, everyone else should. We should never try to do anything good for society because people have had hardship before. We shouldn't try to cure cancer. That would be really unfair to the people who've had cancer and died from it.
Without a doubt. Here is Bernie Sanders out in front of the Supreme Court today, trying to rally people. And now, again, there are two issues here. One is, do the states that brought a lawsuit or the other two plaintiffs have standing? If the court finds that any of them have standing to sue, then they will address the question as to whether Joe Biden has authority under the so-called HEROES Act, which is if there's some type of emergency, and of course, that the Department of Education has the ability to relieve or student debt, either put a pause on it or to relieve it fully. That was the authority that Trump used to pause student debt. Then Biden used to pause student debt. And then during the course of this, when there was still a state of the emergency because of COVID, basically said, we're going to forgive $10,000 to $20,000 if you had a Pell Grant. Here is Bernie Sanders out in front of the Supreme Court calling for this student debt cancellation.
We need the best educated workforce in the entire planet. We need you guys to go out and be the doctors and the nurses and the scientists and the teachers that we desperately need. Long-term or not so long-term, in this wealthy country, we should understand that education from childcare to graduate school is a human right. It should be free to all. And our fight right now is at least to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Right now in America, we have 45 million Americans, young people, drowning in student debt. And I have talked to people all over this country who literally delay having a family, can't have any kids, they can't afford a car, they can't afford to have a middle-class life because they're drowning in their student debt. In America, you should not have to face financial ruin because you want a damn education.
And, you know, this is a student debt sort of like a cancellation for, a limited amount is really just the beginning of what we really need to do. We just got an IM from Golden Oyster Cult. I posit that one of the reasons the economy hasn't collapsed despite Jerome Powell's best efforts is the student loan pause has prevented so many people from falling further into debt and poverty. There's no doubt that that's part of it. There's no doubt that that's part of it. I mean, I think we also have a very strong labor situation that's going on. We're going to start to see some rollbacks on food stamps tomorrow, although that has happened in some red states prior to now. I think there's a lot of things that have combined to keep the economy afloat, but that's certainly one of them. 1 in 5 Americans hold student debt. So, of course, this pause has helped the economy. Without a doubt. And we should say that, as early as 2015, maybe it was 2014, the head of the U.S. Home Builders Association said the number one inhibiting factor to new home starts was student debt in this country. So it has a massive implications for the economy. And despite the fact that it's ridiculous to say, like, well, it's not fair that, I paid my student debt and people are getting it done. This is something that's going to help everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I remember this. I think it was like a Texas sort of student Republican said, I paid off all my debt and worked really hard and, didn't go out with friends and did all that stuff. And then the comment, the best quote that I saw was, oh, so you gave all your money to like basically unproductive places instead of putting it back into the economy and getting people like, making the economy work.
Right. I mean, if you want to go that way, these people who are going to have their debt relieved and these people who have had their debt paused, they're job creators. Yep. They're going out and they're spending their money in a productive manner in a way that is going to have a much greater multiplier effect in terms of their dollars than it would if they were paying to these back to the government. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Right? I mean, $1 back to the U.S. government is it just goes away. It's just it just basically checks off a box on a ledger. But when you take that dollar and you go spend it at the supermarket or at the bakery or whatnot, that dollar keeps traveling through the economy. I don't know how many times, 4 or 5 times. So much more advantageous for the economy
and also
to pause student debt.
Yeah, and just back to like what the case is even going to entail. I mean, I know that the Biden administration used the HEROES Act emergency kind of authorization there, but the Department of Education already has standing statutorily, or not standing, they have statutory ability to cancel student debt in a variety of situations. So there should be that extra layer that should allow the Biden administration to do this. It's just, this is an ideological extremist Supreme Court.
I think the Biden administration, I don't know if they'll argue that in the case. It'll be interesting to see if they bring that up because they didn't use that authority in this instance.
Right.
They could have. They didn't because, of course, they don't want to set a precedent that would exist beyond the emergency of COVID. That is sort of the classic.
Maybe they can return to that well if the Supreme Court strikes it down.
They're going to have to, or not. But we shall see.